Hey, Alan, welcome back. Avoid Crisis Podcast, episode 11.
Well, welcome back yourself, Ray. Nice time on a little trip away, and now back here, ready to tackle the next discussion for Avoid Crisis.
Yep, we've got a hot one on the plate today, so to speak. Um, Thank you for proposing this topic. And again, to our listeners, we are open to topics. We want to shift away from community banking and the banking situation. I think we've kind of got ahead of that. We will revisit that at key points. But we're going to shift now for this episode and maybe a couple others onto a new topical area. Alan, you want to introduce it to our audience?
Sure. From the angles of appointed czars of government to the march of billionaires penguining in Washington, the
Wait,
unexplainable will
penguin,
remain.
penguining.
Yeah.
What is penguining, Alan?
Well, penguining is when you just bring a whole bunch of, the same type, march them down to a location.
Okay, I think we have a visual on this, right? If people want to get the idea of what penguin, what our politicians and business leaders are doing on this climate issue about the marching of penguins. We got a visual on that.
Edinburgh Zoo is very famous for their breeding.
That's,
We do have very
that's
successful
great.
breeding years.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
We got it.
Yeah, well,
That's the idea.
that's what we saw in Washington when we had individuals from the artificial intelligence development community coming to Washington to talk to the White House. And again, from the angles of appointed czars of government to the march of billionaire penguining in Washington, the unexplainable is going to remain. And that includes artificial intelligence is limited to a certain degree. It's going to achieve a lot of things, but it's not going to solve some of the crises that we're facing in the climate, including what we'll call the boiling of the ocean. And what we're talking about here is just sea temperatures rising. It's known that this is happening. We're hitting very, very high levels, and we're seeing not only just those temperatures rise, but we're also seeing, as a result of that, the sea levels rising. We have a lot of different things to talk about here today. I just want to say this: our planet Earth really is in a crisis.
I agree 100%. You know, the ocean, what, two-thirds of the surface area of the Earth, something a little more than that.
Yeah,
Um, it's an incredible carbon sink. The amount of carbon that is stored in the ocean is much more than that that's stored on land. And they would look at trees, and those are incredible carbon sinks as well. You look at the tundra up in the Arctic that's being exposed. That's an incredible amount of carbon in there that's being released. The ocean is a big issue, and the acidity of the temperature changes the acidity as well. We've got problems. Great Barrier Reef was the canary, or is the canary in the coal mine. That was the first ecosystem that showed strain, um, and the sea temperature rise is going to have significant impacts all the way around. It will affect weather. That's
sure.
going to change. Hurricanes and tornadoes. We're already seeing this effect, sea level rise, etc. But I want to stay focused on the ocean part of it. Um, and dig into that. I noticed from your background, and I've known this about you for a while, Alan, that you love our scaly friends. You're a fisherman.
Well, I think the thing about the fish is that they really are a reflection of what's happening in the environment and in their environment. So let's just talk first of all about the ocean temperatures as an example. Um, the average temperature of the ocean's surface, and you can see this if you want to go to like www.seatemperature.org, and you'll get sort of a sense of just how much the ocean has been like increasing in its total temperature. But the April here, we had temperatures of 21.1 Celsius. Now that's a record. Ever since we started keeping satellite tracking of this, the next closest was 21.0, and that was in April of 2016. So something's happening here to have the to have this like rise, and we do have ocean temperatures rising and falling. I mean, these lead to events like you're talking about in the weather, like El Nino, things like that. But there's something else going on, and one of the things is that as sea temperatures rise, what I'm believing is happening is that fish from the very deep are dying, and they
Mhm.
may not actually float all the way up. But as an
Right.
example, in Oregon, we just recently saw some very unusual fish um, floating up and landing on the beaches. Um, you know, we also had a big 18-foot sea monster is what they called it. It was an oarfish that came up off of California's coast. The ones I'm talking about in Oregon are lancetfish, and both of these have these tremendously large bodies, really, and jaws, and they live in the deep, and we don't know very much about them. Um, even like for instance, with the oarfish, it wasn't discovered until 1772. We didn't even know about it. They live in the really deep sea, and by that I mean like we're talking 650 feet down to maybe over 3,000 feet down the sea. There's
Mhm.
unknown area down there. We just don't know
Yep.
what's happening.
Yep.
So can you imagine what kind of pressure there must be at those depths? But
Oh,
anyhow,
it's
the oarfish,
amazing. Yeah.
it grows up to 50 feet long and it can weigh up to
Wow.
600 pounds. I mean,
Wow.
this is a really big fish. Now, this one that was found here in off the California coast. I mean, it was amazing. Like, why? You would think that if something that far deep were to die, that it would end up never rising all the way up to where we could ever even see it. How's this
Mhm.
happening? So the thing is that it seems like something is happening to these deep l- living fish in the ocean, and we don't know what's happening down there. I mean, um, could it be something like a deep sea hypothermal vent? And maybe you're aware of those, but we didn't even know that those existed until back in like 1977. This was along the Galapagos Rift, where they were doing some scientific studies, and they saw that there were temperature differences in very short period of distance. So what was
Right.
happening is they could see that there would be like, you know, 400 degrees Celsius, uh, near freezing, um, you know, and it would just jump up to like, huge numbers higher. And this is all in the same kind of space, so there'd be these um, really like strange temperature differences. And it's like, what is causing that? And what they discovered was that there were like these hydrothermal vents. They're kind of
Right.
like geysers, are kind of like a hot spring. It's on the ocean floor. And, this is where if whatever's happening down there, whatever's pushing up, this is a part of what's been going on for a long time. But what we don't know is there more things happening with this now, and is it impacting marine life?
Right. Um, Interesting. They're part of the oceanic science. They measure water temperatures at various depths. And recently, I understand within the last year, was the first time that they've measured temperature change at the deepest layer that we've been tracking for years.
Hmm.
Um, so at the top level, it's going to be the warmest, right?
Hmm.
But then as you get deeper, you get down to, you know, over 1,000 meters, 2,000 meters. I believe the deepest one was 5,000 meters, if I remember correctly. Um, you would expect those temperatures to be very stable, and they're not anymore. So this is using the colloquialism, canary in the coal mine. Uh, Watching what's happening in our oceans is a big problem. So at Avoid Crisis here, we like the three words, right? Analyze, decide, act. So I think we're, analyze phase before we can decide what we're going to do. What are some of the tools that we can use to analyze what the heck's going on? Is AI, this is going to tie us into what we were talking about, when we were thinking about this episode. Can AI help us in this area?
Well, to the extent that it is taking data and providing predictions, uh, it can be useful. It may be really helpful as far as predicting weather. And there's a lot of catastrophic events that happen where we kind of see it happening, and we kind of know it's going to happen. But it would be even better to kind of have AI be involved in predicting weather patterns, maybe providing, better warnings, better modeling. I mean, we saw that when a hurricane comes in, I mean, nobody seems to know where it's going to land, right? I mean, we've gone through that, right? So maybe AI can help with that. Maybe it can gather more data, like data from cell phones, from different observation towers, and it can gather all that information. It can perform some sort of task to identify better reliability for the weather. I mean, will AI replace the weatherman? I don't know. Can AI be an entertaining weatherman? I don't know. But
Right. Yeah.
but they certainly can help there. But they're not going to be able to change the things that are causing the increase in the temperatures that we're seeing.
Yeah.
And that's going to really require humans to change behaviors, and that could be anything from looking at trying to solve for greenhouse gas issues to looking at, like you were mentioning earlier, on the carbon, looking at ways to um, have some policy type work that would help here. And there's a lot of inputs out there and thoughts that are out there, but one thing is pretty evident. The trend says that it's really becoming more of an issue, and it is a crisis that's developing. And when we talk about the analyzing part, and then you're going to decide what you're going to do and then act. I mean, what is the actions that you should be taking? Is it getting your congressman involved? Is it being more of an advocate, maybe educating other people? So I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
I think it's a great point because there's a number of things you touched on there, and I think that the AI part of this equation is much more data, as you said, data analytics and modeling for weather and other effects. But the AI and machine learning cannot change human behavior. It can only inform us. And I don't know what else other information people need, societies, governments, businesses, individuals. But climate change is real. The ocean is getting warmer. It's having huge impacts on our society in so many ways. And if we want to avoid where this is headed, we need to decide that this is important in the aggregate and also at the individual level, and then take action. And so I know, for example, I just came from Jazz Fest. I'm officially not back at work again until tomorrow. This is my last day of official vacation. Then I'm back at work. So
Yeah.
I'll shave
You
tomorrow.
deserve it. Yeah,
Yeah, there you
you
go.
deserve it.
But keeping our cadence on the show recordings is important, and so here I am, unshaven and all. But my point is that even a little thing. I was in New Orleans. I took my own metal straw, and I took my own reusable plastic fork that I use in my camping gear. And every time I went and got food, I ate with my own fork and my own straw. I mean, something super small. But
Yeah,
if millions of people do this, if
right.
a couple billion people did this, it will have an impact.
Behavioral changes. As an example, I've decided to try to walk more. Um, I've looked at places that I would normally drive and think, can I walk there? And I'm going to go ahead and just try to walk more. I'm going to see how much I can just modify my own behavior, just in trying to try to reduce the amount of travel that I have that is potentially adding to the greenhouse gas issue, and just at the same time, get the benefits of walking. But here's something else I want to talk about, because you mentioned about fishing, and you're right. And as I mentioned before about um, what ends up happening with the environment of fish, there's certain things that are real telltales. Now, I don't know if you ever heard of the bull trout as an example, but the bull trout was a staple of the Native Americans' diet. And over time, it has actually become less and less available, or even present, I guess. Right now, it's only in elevations over 10,000 feet. You can't have forestry activities going on. You can't have agriculture activities going on. You can't have cows. All those things basically make it more difficult for the bull trout to be able to reproduce with its eggs. Very, very much a protected species to this point, but it used to be very abundant and very, very plentiful. And it was pretty much at the top of the food chain in the whole trout world. As an example, even in the McCloud River in California, they used to have the bull trout and rainbow trout DNA from the McCloud River are all over the world. But here's the point that I'm talking about with fish and something that's changing. This year, as an example, I have seen more state and world records on both the ocean and the fish, in the freshwater fish, state and world records than I've ever seen before. And this is just in this year. Okay, so like for instance, in Wyoming, there was an angler, his name was Patrick Edwards, and he got 2 state records in 2 weeks, and one of them was a world record. So he caught a 3-pound, 15.6 ounce long nose sucker, which you probably never heard of. And then he caught a 6-pound, 8.45 ounce white sucker, which was a world record. Now, you might be thinking, why am I talking about white suckers, right? Or long nose suckers. But here's the thing to know about suckers. The sucker fish is a bottom feeder.
Right.
And predatory fish, like maybe a bass or a trout, they'll prey on them. So they'll see them down the bottom, and if they're not hidden well enough, they might end up being, the target of those predatory fish. But they thrive in temperatures that are between 72 degrees and 78 degrees Fahrenheit. Now, to put that into context of trout really start to have problems surviving when the temps of the water get over 70 degrees. Warm water has less oxygen, and the issue of oxygen is really related to how much they can grow. And also the issue of oxygen in the ocean is a big issue, because what we're seeing is tuna sizes are, for instance, getting smaller, because what ends up happening is for the fish to grow, it has to have a lot of oxygen. And so as the temperatures warm up, there's less oxygen in that water. Now, this is true in the ocean, and it's true in fresh water. So if all of a sudden there's a lot more suckers, there's probably a lot less trout. So the whole point is that we may be seeing warming temperatures in our rivers. We may be seeing warming temperatures in our oceans. And ultimately, what it's going to do is it's going to change what fish are available. And that's going to impact fishing. That's going to impact food supply. That's going to impact our global economy. So we're really looking at a crisis that is in development right now.
Absolutely. The food that we get from the ocean worldwide is, in fact, we're going to look this up for a subsequent show to try to measure the impact on our food supply for humans in the world based upon ocean sources and the effect that increasing temperatures will have on that. It's a very, very significant issue. And it's funny when you were talking about, the long nose suckers and the white suckers being bottom feeders. I've known some of those over the years, but what I find interesting from that story, Alan, is that we're now the anglers aren't normally fishing at the depths that such bottom feeders would normally live. So what that just tells you, as the water is getting warmer, these guys are coming up more toward the surface, and the oxygen issue, absolutely, I wasn't aware of that. Thanks for sharing that part. But it's an ecosystem. As you were saying, given the size of these fish, it gets me starting to think about what's changing in the biosphere, the ecosystem, with the smaller fish that they prey upon, who are probably more vulnerable to changes in temperature, and how does that affect their whole feeding cycle, what they can eat?
Well, when we talk about a predatory fish and we talk about their food supply, fish that are predatory eat other fish. So if you go back to seeing that we have state records being set now, um, and we're seeing world records being set. I mean, maybe these fish are eating other fish because, I don't know if you've ever seen where a pond has dried up. And what ends up happening is you don't find just a whole bunch of skeletons of a whole bunch of fish. What you find is a couple of big ones,
Yeah, that's right.
and you're like,
That's
oh,
right.
this only had like a couple. No, they ate everything else that was out there.
On the way
So,
down, right? As things were
right.
declining.
Yeah,
Right,
yeah,
right,
yeah.
right, right.
So, whenever we're looking at this, I mean, you know, um, Missouri had two state record fish this year. Okay.
Yeah,
Um, there was a huge, huge Chinook salmon that was a world record caught in Argentina. And so, I mean, you just look at these world records and you go, okay, is what is happening here is that, things must be healthy because we have bigger fish or finally somebody's catching a bigger fish. I don't think that that's really what's happening here.
right.
I think it's a distribution of the population. And I think these are the survivors.
Mhm.
And, um, I think that there's a real impact here and something to be watching.
All right, so I'm going to throw this out to our listeners now. Send us messages. Um, uh, Alan at avoidcrisis.com, Ray at avoidcrisis.com. We'd love to get your feedback. We will do the research. I think, Alan, this topic I think has a couple more episodes for us to do some research and to dig in and to talk about it. And I really, by the time we wrap up this topic, I want to have a better handle. I feel at a loss when we talk about analyze, decide, act. I action. That's what we need to figure out. And obviously, we're not going to dig into that in one episode, but after a few episodes, I want to have some more tangible action items that we can do in our own behavior, but as well as how we're going to appeal to our political leaders,
Sure.
the penguins, and our business leaders into what we're going to do. ESG is the rage these days, right?
Well, good news for you here, Ray.
Yeah.
I've got you a ticket
Okay.
for the UC Davis Coastal and Marine Sciences Institute presentation that's coming up. I got you a Zoom ticket, and our listeners can go there too. This is coming up on the 19th of May,
Okay.
and it's implications of rising temperatures, coastal marine estuarine ecosystems. This is going to be put on by UC Davis at the Puda Creek Room. So if you want to go
Oh
to
yeah.
Davis, you go. Yeah. So yeah. Yeah. So
I I know Puda Creek. Yeah.
yep, yeah. Okay. So have your tickets there, but I mean, certainly our listeners can join up for that too. Um, UC Davis Coastal Marine Sciences Institute again, implications of rising temperatures, and obviously they're concerned, and they're concerned about just what it's going to do in the area here of the bay and the estuaries here, and obviously there's a lot of impact in wildlife, bird life. It's the whole circle of impact that we're not seeing yet. Obviously, it's getting more and more attention, and there needs
Right.
to be more people involved in looking at this crisis that's developing.
Right. Right. 100%. Interesting. The mention there was about estuaries,
Hmm.
which is essentially where rivers meet oceans, if I understand correctly, and from a simple guy's perspective, right? Um, and then earlier you talked about Chinook salmon.
Hmm.
Aren't those river spawned and born in
Yeah,
rivers,
yeah, yeah. I
grow
mean,
up in the
here,
ocean, and then
yeah,
come back to the rivers
right. I
to
mean, the
yeah.
Klamath River, you have the return of the Chinook salmon. You have that in the Trinity River as well.
Mhm.
They'll come back from the ocean. They are fascinating animals, very large, very, very, very fast. I mean, they're very, very strong. And they were really what helped the Native Americans get through the winter because they provided a great food supply, especially when they came back in at the time of their runs. So their runs came in, for instance, at least in the Trinity River, they're generally known for coming in around October. I think they run twice a year, but around October, so it helped to prepare for the winter. But to have again something so large being caught, that is it sounds good, but I'm just saying more to think about there if rising temperatures are having an impact on that. let's
Absolutely.
jump a little bit to AI, because we talked about some of the things AI could do. We're hearing more and more about AI. Google had its developers conference start
Yep.
today. They're talking about now. They want to have 40 languages that they can interpret. They're trying to open up a Wednesday's drive-through where you're going to just speak into it. You don't have to have the person there taking that order. I mean, AI's got all kinds of things happening, but at the same time, we've got this backdrop of tech people losing their jobs. MarketWatch said just this week that there's in 2023 already 192,000 tech jobs lost,
Hmm.
and AI is going to potentially replace jobs, modify
Hmm.
jobs.
Hmm.
We don't know exactly what's going to be impacted, but there's going to be a lot of impacts. And the thing is that AI is really a continuation of really machine learning. It's like the next step up. I mean,
Right.
this is going to be a revolutionary change. What happens with artificial intelligence? It's continuing to grow. There's a lot of promise. There's a lot of people saying, "Hey, we're involved in that." It's almost like at one point, all these companies came out and said, "Hey, we're .com too." Another set of companies came out and said, "Oh, we're also in nano." Now
Oh yeah.
everyone's in AI, right?
Right.
Everyone's in AI. I mean,
Right. Right.
um, but let's remember. I mean, when was the first time where all of a sudden we need to like look at this and go, hey, it's coming? So talk about avoid crisis, where you're going to first of all think, you're going to decide, and then you're going to act. The first time you should have really been thinking about it was way back in the mid 90s, when IBM started talking about Deep Blue. Now I don't know if you remember
Hmm.
about Deep Blue, but
Hmm.
back in 1997, there was this chess match that they had
That's right.
with the world
What,
champion at the time,
Kasparov?
Kasparov. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
And so he's playing against the machine, man versus the machine. And man did win, but ultimately they didn't win enough to win the whole, regular tournament rules,
Yeah.
3.5 to 2.5. So, then they had a rematch. Deep Blue won again. That what they were doing at that point, though, was they were exploring up to 200 million possible chess positions per second. And that's just with algorithms.
Right.
So the thing is that we're in a very different stage with computer chips, with processing power, than we were in 1997. So just think about that. You,
Right.
you take 26 years, okay, of computer development, software development, intellectual power,
Moore's
what
law.
yeah, everything, right?
Right.
um, and say, okay, what are we facing right now? Like, if you're not worried or concerned about what AI is going to do to you in your life, you need to be.
For better and worse, right? There's going to be some advantages in your life, but there's going to be some disadvantages as well. Oh, there's going to be an enormous displacement in the labor force. You know, on the positive side, though, we have a declining labor force. Right, the dot com boom. No, not the dot com boom. The baby boom. The boomers after World War II, all the kids that were born in that next 20-year cycle, right? And older, and then there was a couple of echoes in there. But if you look at the population, it's take out immigration, it's actually declining. So our labor force is is shrinking somewhat. This will help offset that. On the other side, it will make that labor force more efficient. So that's a tool, like dig a hole not with a shovel but with a backhoe, kind of thing. So
Sure.
it's gonna make that one worker more efficient, but it's going to displace those who are not trained, who are not
Mhm.
educated. It's going to be a wider split in our society between the haves and the have-nots, based upon are you in a role or a profession that is going to work with and leverage AI, or are you going to be one that's replaced by AI?
Right.
And
Well,
so we got both sides here.
yeah.
And with regard to climate, I think that it's a great tool for analysis. It's going to help us get to that decision point faster. But can it decide and can it act? That's what
No,
humans got to do at this point.
human behavior is going to be changing,
Right.
and it needs to change. And
Right.
I think that as we've talked about all these different things, I mean, we have a lot more to explore on all these topics. I would say today we're just really kind of scratching the surface. We'll do a lot more digging.
Hmm.
Certainly listen to what our listeners have to say. But we need to really be focusing in on looking at all the information that we're seeing and looking at our climate, looking at the impacts to the economy that we're seeing, and look at this from the job level on your own personal level as far as a job goes and how it's going to impact you. And I think these are all things to be aware of as we go through the process of analyzing, discussing, thinking, and then making some decisions and acting. Once again, Ray, coming up here on the time. Can't believe it goes by so fast.
Wow. Yep, here we are.
All right. Good to see you again.
Great to see you. We're going to put links to that webinar in the show
Sure.
notes for the
Sure.
for the listeners. They can get in on that, and
Sure.
then we're going to be working on. Hopefully, we're working hard. We're trying to get a guest on for next episode to talk deeper about this issue here with climate change and AI. So thanks for bringing it up, Alan, and as always, a great conversation.
Good to see you, Ray.
Great to see you. All right, see you next time.
Take care.
Bye-bye.